14, stayed out one night. Oh, mama.
So here's an opportunity for you to raise my spirits or not. I'm sure other folks are probably feeling the same way. My energy level is low, and I'm feeling a little discouraged by the state of the quote-unquote resistance and all of the advancements that Trump and the Republicans have been able to make. So am I right to be alarmed? Because my spirits are feeling a little low about all this.
I think what people have done in the last year has made a tremendous difference. Things are bad, and they're going to get worse before they get better. But if it weren't for the marches at the very beginning, if it weren't for the lawyers filing briefs and getting in the way, if it weren't for all the phone calls, if it weren't for the indivisible, if it weren't for all the protesters, if it weren't for all the local activity, if it weren't for the investigative journalists, things could be a lot worse than they are. So America hasn't done a great job reacting to this, but some Americans have done a great job reacting to this, and that has made a difference. And we're going to find out how much of a difference it makes if we all get tired and say we can't do it anymore. Then things will really go south very quickly. So I don't know if that's going to cheer you up, but it does. Things are bad, but we have stopped them from being much worse.
Well, that helps a little bit, maybe. So in terms of thinking historically about resistance against authoritarians, petty fascists, demagogues, despots in waiting, so you have a democracy right now, I don't think it is controversial to say this, that's ailing and sick. So how does an authoritarian like Donald Trump, how does he negotiate the resistance that he's seeing? But from his side and from his allies' side, how do they manipulate the system to push back or to ignore those sort of actions in this pluralistic society?
It's a good question, but you need to see how they think, but without getting drawn into it and without mirroring it yourself. So if you're in a position like his, the first thing you do is constantly claim to have a majority, even if you don't. You talk about the people as though they're on your side. That's one thing that you do. The second thing that you do if you're them, and this is something that you question the legal foundations of the system. So the rule of law, sad to say, is the thing that we're hanging on to. Checks and balances haven't worked out so well. The judiciary is slowly being changed, but we still do have the rule of law. And so the constant set of attacks on the Mueller investigation, for whatever else it is, it's an emanation of the rule of law. So the attacks on Mueller, the attacks on the investigation, this orchestrated leak the memo campaign, those are all the kinds of things that you do. Because if you're a Trump-style authoritarian, you're not trying to make a big, powerful state. What you're trying to do is make the state dysfunctional, and then at the end of the crumbling, you and your oligarch friends are at the top. The rule of law is the main target. The third thing you do, and this is obvious, is that you discredit the resistance actively, both by calling people names, whether that's African Americans or whether that's Native Americans or whether it's women or whatever it might be, so that they get distracted and discouraged, and whether they take it all personally, or whether it's by saying it didn't really happen or it was paid. So the protests are paid. The journalism is all fake news, which is the final thing which they do, and they've been doing it for a year. And insofar as Mr. Trump has a domestic policy, this is it. You try to shake people's belief in factuality. Because if you do that, then everybody just has their own opinion. And if everybody just has their own opinion, in the end, the thing that talks is money, right? In the end, he who can produce the spectacle is going to win. That's what you do, and they've been doing it pretty consistently. Another thing you do is you treat the whole world as a kind of stage. Whether it's North Korea or whatever it is, you don't really care about what happens in the United States. What you care about is creating a kind of a scene. You turn the world into a scene of threat, not a scene of challenges that you can overcome or, interests that you can realize, but a scene of threats that are unceasing. And you try to distract people with that. That's their playbook.
So in terms of thinking internationally, and in terms of, as I said, your model, where are we with Trump in international relations and actually maybe not a Reichstag fire, but certainly an attack on North Korea or another country?
If there's anybody out there who thinks that America First is a policy that advances American interests, that's just not the case. America First is a big con. If you're a normal American businessman, say, or if you're a conservative, you think America has values and America First is projecting them, this is just not true. When you look at America First from the point of view of Europe, America First just means that we say that we need special rules, but we don't know what those rules are. And so meanwhile, the Europeans are taking up the mission that we used to have of supporting some sense of universal values. If you're China and you look at America, America First just means that we push the pause button on our own power. And they didn't expect to have such a free hand in Asia, but they do, and they're taking advantage of it. If you are a dictator and you hear America First, you're basically just seeing encouragement. In fact, Mr. Trump often directly gives dictators encouragement to just use strawman tactics. America First ain't a policy. It's a con. I mean, what America First says is all of our problems come from abroad, and therefore we'll solve them with foreign policy. And this is a con because, A, it's not a foreign policy, and B, the whole thing is a substitute for domestic policy. If you've got domestic problems, you have to solve them with domestic policy. So America First, if there's anybody out there who still believes in it, among folks in the middle range of the political spectrum, it's a con. It ain't happening. Second thing, if America has interests, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right on this, if you think America has interests or values, those things are not actually advanced by military parade. And they're not necessarily even advanced by wars. Often, of course, they're not. They are advanced by diplomats. And this is, I think, one of the major stories of the Trump administration that keeps getting under the radar. They have disemboweled the State Department, which means that even if we did have some idea to make peace with North Korea, say, or to try to figure out what's going on in Egypt, or to draw up sanctions on Russia, whatever it is, you need the diplomats to do that. They're the ones who actually do the spade work. And more than that, they're the people who actually know who to talk to in a given country. But we're trying to, it's as though we have diplomacy, but we don't have diplomats. We don't have people at the top of the State Department, and they've disincentivized people from joining the State Department at the bottom. And in the meanwhile, everybody in the middle is basically seriously confused about what they're supposed to be doing. That's like stabbing yourself in the stomach as a power. I mean, again, whether you think America does good things or bad things, no matter what you think America should be doing, it can't do it without the diplomats. And this has real consequences because it means that we're just communicating at the level of people who don't know anything about foreign affairs, right? Mr. Trump doesn't know anything about foreign affairs, but his tweets are 95% of the bandwidth of what people are trying to figure out with. And there just aren't diplomats on the ground who can then pick up the string and say, well, actually, we'd rather talk about A, B, or C. And when it comes to actual war and peace, it really is a problem when you don't have diplomats. The third thing is the spectacle. I mean, I think what Mr. Trump wants is a spectacle, and I don't think it matters to him very much whether that's a war or whether it's something else. I'm sure you caught a few days ago that Mr. Trump was musing aloud, not for the first time, about how it might be a good thing to have a major event, i.e. a terrorist attack, because that will, quote-unquote, bring us all together. Along the same lines is this idea of a military parade. We're going to make the United States have military parades. The Soviets had military parades not because they were winning. They had military parades starting in the 70s because they were losing, and they were trying to show their defiance. This kind of feels like this. We're going to spend a huge amount of money to bring the military to Washington for no particular purpose except for the spectacle of greatness. It actually demonstrates the opposite. We've got one American military veteran committing suicide on average every hour in this country, every hour. Those people, if we're going to care about the military, if we're going to care about the people in the military, let's first think about health care for those folks and get that in some kind of acceptable, civilized condition, and then maybe celebrate having done something like that.
And you tell me if this is just a total misread. I think he's going to have the parade. And then that's just another opportunity for him to say that the Democrats, liberals, progressives, even some sensible Republicans who oppose this are somehow disloyal. Because it's obviously his base wants it. It's part of sort of this, as you said, sort of this authoritarian spectacle, never mind how it fits into the sort of fascist aesthetic. But do you think that's part of the play as well?
We're talking about the military in terms of an image